It's like that, that's the way that it is. It's like that, that's the way that it is. It's that next door neighbor to wake up the kids with the...
All right, so let's start broadly. What is crypto compared to traditional financial markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when we think traditional markets, we think, no, let's not even say that. Traditional financial system. What we say when we say that, it's banks, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so banks, we put, typically how it works, we put money in there as deposits. We might have credit cards with banks.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to our money that we put in the bank? Usually bank loans them to businesses, like maybe yours, right? So let's say you want to start a business, you need some capital to buy trucks, rent a warehouse, buy office equipment. You come to bank, say, hey, I need 100 grand. I don't have 100 grand, but I want to start business and so forth. So that's typically where is the need coming from for bank to service it? Banks have capital. Capital came from depositors, mostly. And bank makes money by loaning to people who needs capital to start businesses or keep them afloat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one aspect. Banks make money by taking from people basically for free and loaning them and charging interest on loans to somebody who needs capital. Another example would be mortgages when people want to buy a house.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a business model for traditional banking system. Let's again summarize what happens to deposit. Deposits sort of sits in the bank, right? And you have access to it by either ATM, like you have a debit card, and you go to ATM, you put your debit card, and you have a way to withdraw some cash. And usually that limits, right? Like $300 per day, $500 per day, depends how you settle in with the bank. But there is typically some limit. And also for purchases, there are limits, right? Like a couple grand, so forth. Usually if you go like above 3 grand or something, they'll mark your transaction as potentially fraudulent and they'll freeze the account. You have to call them and they might not pick up the phone right away. And it's going to be like an hour type of conversation. Okay, so that's a summary of how money is handled by traditional bank. And you also have branches a lot of times, right? You have branches of a bank that could be within the same city, could be regional banks. So they're available within the same state usually. And there are national banks that are available in most of states like Bank of America, Wells Fargo. So you can travel and you can still use your card to make purchases and withdraw money from ATM. Okay, so now with these aspects, let's start talking about crypto. How is it different and how is it similar, if there is any similarity? So generally speaking, idea of ledger is the core for cryptocurrencies. Ledger is a way to store knowledge about transactions that took place thus far and money left on the accounts. So let's imagine we have two of us, right? In this situation, you put in, I don't know, $100 worth of crypto. I put $200 worth of crypto. We did some transactions. So not only those transactions are stored and can be recalled at any given point in the future, there is also a mechanism to have a knowledge in real time how much money left on your account and how much money left on my account. So, for example, you bought a coffee in Starbucks, cost you $5. Now you have 95 on your account, and we can immediately see it on a ledger. So a way to access ledger is usually through tools called blockchain browsers or explorers. So what it is, it's usually a website, and you can search for something like a Bitcoin Explorer, Ethereum Explorer, Cardano Explorer, any kind of blockchain explorer. What usually they provide you in the website, you can put in either identifier for transaction to find a transaction. In that transaction, they usually show you what's the recipient address, what's the sending address, how much was the transaction for, when it took place. And there is also a thing called confirmations. Confirmation, each blockchain have a rhythm, basically. Well, just think about music, right? You have a rhythm, like every 5 seconds there is a beat. So each blockchain have this rhythm, and it's different from one blockchain to another. And this rhythm is when each new block of blockchain is created. So basically, we have all the transactions that took place in the last rhythm interval. We package them together and put them to blockchain. So mechanics, not so much important right now, but the philosophy of how things are organized, that's what's important. So rhythm creates a block. In the block, packages transactions that took place within that interval of time. And that's it, that block added to a chain, and now it's publicly available, visible through explorers. Any questions so far?
No, I'm following.
Okay. All right, so we have this idea of ledger, which is a blockchain, which is publicly available, which is searchable. At any given point of time, not only can see the transaction, you also can see the amount of capital hold on that account real time. So for example, if you share with me address of your account, I be able to put it in Explorer, and I can see that, okay, Max have, I don't know, $95 left. So it's publicly available. Now, you might like it, you might dislike it, but for publicly, how you say, there are privacy-focused blockchains and there are public blockchains that are not trying to hide the transactions or amounts on each account, which is good and bad, perhaps. Because good that we can verify everything. Bad because if I do know that it's your account, now I can make certain assumptions about your spending patterns, about I mean, how wealthy you are and so forth. So some people like it, some people dislike it, or some people compromise it on it, but there is definitely that aspect. There are blockchains that this information is hidden. In fact, I might not be 100% sure if accounts are hidden, but transactions are hidden. Like, for example, Zcash and Monero, the whole purpose of those chains is that transactions take place, but it's much harder to trace where they came from and who, where they came from and what was the kind of assets of transaction, how much money was transferred and how much money left. But don't quote me on this because I haven't used those chains, so I might not have expert knowledge of that. But generally speaking, just remember that there are privacy-focused blockchains, that the whole idea is that you don't reveal those parameters about how much money you have or how much you transacted. So there is each blockchain operates using the algorithm, right? The way they create blocks, the way they transact, we can call it all algorithm or consensus. Sometimes you'll hear word consensus. Consensus is how, okay, so let's use it. Let's introduce another term called nodes, right? So what are the nodes? Nodes are computers around the globe, the network of computers that are participating in this specific protocol, in this specific blockchain. So let's say the system is considered more resilient as more nodes you have out there, Because think about it, if there are only two of us, your computer and my computer, I can basically come to your house, put the gun against your head and say, kill this machine or I'm going to kill you, right? And you're probably going to choose to unplug your machine. So
Right.
the more nodes you have across the globe, the more resilient the system is. Now, so consensus, coming back, consensus is a algorithm which allows these nodes to derive conclusion of which transaction took place and how blocks currently exist, right? So think about it. In some part of the world, right, we have a transaction that happened. Somehow, the rest of nodes around the globe needs to also get knowledge about this transaction. So one of the key aspects of blockchains and how they compare to one another is how fast the other nodes would know about this transaction that took place.
Oh, I see.
And this is very important problem to solve, because there is such a thing called double spend problem, is when the transactions don't go fast enough that some nodes would not know the transaction already took place from specific account to specific account, and that the hacker would want to do it another transaction with money he no longer possess, because node that didn't get the first transaction would be like, oh yeah, he used to have $95, so he should be able to do the transaction. So that's called double spend problem. And I mean, that's not like, seems like super hard thing to solve. It doesn't seem like it's a problem more often than not. But early on in the days, there were problems like that. Okay, so talked about privacy, talk about ledger, talk about blocks. So you heard about things called miners, right?
No, never heard of it.
Miners. Okay, miners, you can use term miners to people who participate in mining, and you can use term miner as to describe the equipment that is used for mining. So for example, they call it mining rigs, very specialized piece of computer that is geared towards doing very specific operation of calculating various things. Idea is that the way a lot of consensus algorithms are created is that nodes are sort of competing once against another. Who's gonna be the one who is entitled to register new block? So there is a incentive for them to perform certain tasks. They get rewarded once they are the winner. And the system is also kind of dispersed in a way that in the long run, everybody going to be becoming registered one way or another in some ratio. It's just the sequence could be somewhat random, right? You can be registered today, and I can be registered like 50 days from now. But at some point, it will be my turn. It's a very simplistic way to say it, but just think about it in this way, because for the sake of what we're talking about today, it's not so important, the details of this process. But then what you should remember, who are the miners and how they participate. So miners are the people who operate specific equipment that sole job is to register new blocks. So right, so the transactions are packaged together, blocks are registered, and the node that is registering that transaction gets reward. Where the reward coming from? All the people who send a transaction during that interval of time, they all pay a little bit of fee. So that fee is accumulating and it's get distributed to the node that registered that block. So, I mean, think about it as a meter when you park your car, right? Everybody who needs to park, they pay to the meter, and then at the end of the day, government takes the whole thing, and here you go, day is over. So same goes with miners and rewards they receive for registering blocks. So this way they can pay for spending electricity and investing in equipment, and also have some profits, more or less.
Mhm.
Okay, so got that. Okay, what else? So how we get access to funds, right? And where the money actually stored. So money in this case are stored as simply reference points. There is no physical money. There is just information that I have $200, you have $95.
Mhm.
And then within stint of transactions, there is constant accounting going on that keeps on tabs on your account and my account. So there is no per se physical money anywhere, but there is a system out there running on those nodes that constantly sharing this ledger between one another, that everybody in the system knows that you have 95 and I have 200. And as soon as we have new transaction, it updates that record. So that's basically what the money is. So think about it as almost like a Google Cloud or something, right? It's just there somewhere up in the cloud, but
Mhm.
you have access to it. Same goes here. You're never gonna see it. It's basically non-tangible, right? But you have a way to interact with your account. In order for you to interact with your account, you need to possess what's something called private keys. So there are two pieces of the puzzle. One is the address, which you can think about as account in a bank, and two is a key. With regards to banks, we use credit debit cards. With regards to blockchain, we use private key. So what is a private key? It's a sequence of characters that you need to basically provide with during transaction, so that the system actually knows that you is who you are and the account is actually yours because you actually possess that key. So that key is unique. Okay, so whenever you have wallet, right, you can have wallet on your mobile phone. That private key is stored on that wallet behind the scenes. So you never really see it. Usually you just enter some sort of password to transact, but the private key is actually there on that wallet in that software,
Mhm.
stored in some sort of file. And there is a term called sign in transaction. So that key is needed to sign transaction in order for it to flow according to plan. Any questions so far?
Oh no, not yet.
Okay. Okay, so we got, so wallets usually are available on mobile phones. They also available as extensions to browser. For example, you have a Chrome browser, you can put wallet extension for the browser.
Mhm.
So any kind of mobile platform. Now, there is term called paper wallet, but I wouldn't really, I mean, I personally don't refer to it as a wallet, but whenever you create a wallet, you usually provided something called seed phrase. So seed phrase is usually 12 to 15 words randomly selected that this sequence is very unique for this specific wallet.
Mhm.
So we talked about private key, which is a way to access cloud account, right? So this seed phrase is a way to restore the wallet you just created if you ever need to. So for example, you drop your phone in the toilet, it's no longer usable, you bought new phone, you install wallet software, and usually there are two options: create new wallet or restore a wallet from seed phrase. So that seed phrase will help you to restore your access to that account on any device that you happen to have.
Gotcha. Mhm.
Okay. So now how people usually go about that seed phrase, you can memorize it, You can write it and put it like in a safe or something like that. You can print it on a piece of paper. You can find them. You can find those things on Amazon or eBay where they provide you with like metal case where you can put these words in a specific sequence and lock them with like a lock, almost like a portable safe in a way. But it at least it helps you with things like fire, right? Because if you have that wallet, paper, it's called paper wallet. If you have that seed phrase burned in fire, then unless you remember it by heart, that's gone. Okay, what else? So you can send and receive money, funds. How do you usually do that? In order for anybody to send funds to anybody, they need to know the address of the account. Sometimes the same is called public key. So I like the idea of address. It's more visual for me. When I say, when people say public key, you're like, well, what the hell is public key? So not to confuse things, address, and to access address, you need to have a private key. So in order for me to send money to you, you need to tell me one way or another the address. It's usually, again, sequence of some numbers, digits, and it's pretty long. I would say maybe like 40 different digits. There are no spaces between. It's just one big string. And once I have the address, that's all I need. So in order for you to send money, you just need the address. In order for you to send somebody funds, you just need their address. In order for you to execute transaction, you need to type in that address, and you also need to enter some sort of usually password, right? Your wallet would ask you to create password so that you can be authenticating the transaction. And behind the scene, that wallet would gonna apply that private key that's stored behind the scene to sign a transaction. So you yourself don't really type private key. The wallet itself have it stored and kind of stamps the transaction with it every time you successfully submit your password. Okay. So you can provide your address to somebody by simply giving the string, or even easier is to show in QR code, and the other person either can scan with the camera or scan from screen of monitor and so forth. So that's make it easier, so then there are no typos, because it only takes one character to be off in that address and you can send money and never see them again. It's just gonna go to like black hole.
Oh, wow.
If that address exists, well, somebody gonna get a gift. If that address doesn't exist, I'm not really sure where it's going. I think it's just literally goes to black hole. You cannot take it back. So basically there is no agency in blockchain system which can revert the transaction. So there is such a term called immutable transaction. That's what is the benefit of public blockchain, is that once transaction is gone, it's gone. You cannot really stop it. To stop the transaction, you need to basically unplug all the nodes in the network. And the more of those you have, the harder it is to do. Good number would be a couple of thousands of nodes. So if you can imagine, it's really hard to do, to kill this network if they are dispersed across the entire universe or globe. Universe, I think it's the stars. We're not talking about the planet Earth so far, but I've heard that there are somebody deployed a node in the space. I'm not sure how true it is or not. Like, I'm not sure. I've read somewhere that I think either Ethereum or Bitcoin node exists on a space shuttle or something like that.
Oh, wow.
But I'm not sure how true that is. Okay, so where do you want to take this conversation next? Okay, one more thing that I remember. So there are wallets that are meant to be used for only a very specific blockchain. So let's say only for Bitcoin or only for Ethereum. And there are wallets that can be used to transact with multiple blockchains from the same interface. So for example, Exodus is one of them. You can use Exodus to transact in many blockchains. So these wallets are called HD wallets. Not that important for you right now. It's I think it's highly deterministic wallet, HD wallet. And the way they do it, again, algorithmically, they're able to kind of package together in a tree of some sort the private keys to keep that information available from what seed phrase. So basically, once you put seed phrase in a HD wallet, it can somehow unarchive the entire sequence of private keys so that all the blockchains that you interact, they can actually recreate those wallets. So yeah, you can have wallet for one chain or you can have wallet for multiple chains. For Bitcoin, we have miners, but very similar use case, similar role is played by stakers in proof of stake blockchains. Okay, that's something we haven't talked about yet. So there are mostly two types of blockchain. So we talked about privacy, non-privacy. This is from different angle. The way the consensus mechanism works, there are two types: proof of work or proof of stake. Proof of work is what I described before. You need to perform some task, and as you are the winner of that challenge compared to other nodes, then you get the right to register the block. So that's proof of work. You need to prove that you perform the work and you finish it first. Now, in proof of stake, it's not like that. You need to have some skin in the game, financially speaking, and then you get the right to register block at some point of time. So, for example, hypothetically speaking, you have 100 ETH. I have 100 ETH. In proof of stake blockchain, you need to stake, which is basically registering your funds as the intent to participate in registration, right? It's almost like a pledge to go for, I don't know, president office or something like that. Like, hey, in order for me to run for president, let's say I need to put in, I don't know, a fee for like $100. So here's roughly the same idea. You put in the stake, and it could be big or small, in order for an algorithm consider you to be a register at some point, right? And the bigger your stake, the more often you're going to register blocks. And reward system is exactly the same as proof of work, proof of stake. So what's the fundamental difference beyond how they work is the effect on energy and compute power. Proof of work, you need to have really powerful machines that are expensive to do this task, so yet you get your money. In proof of stake, you can run it on very basic machine because it's not critical your computing power. What's critical is you have funds at stake. So that's that. And you probably have heard that in politics, they argue about this impact on environment from cryptocurrencies. So that's mostly a way for them to, how you say, put brakes on expansion of crypto in masses rather than actual concern. Because I mean, nobody talks about how much electricity does Amazon uses, right, for like storage of cloud and such. So that's just a meaningless conversation, basically, because you have use of resources for some sort of result. we never really assessed how much Amazon is using for providing cloud service or Microsoft for providing Bing or whatever. So it's kind of absolute debate. Okay, so where you want to go next?
What would be the next thing to discuss?
Well, I'm asking you,
Yeah.
is there anything that you maybe heard or thought about in this topic that we didn't cover yet?
Well, would be interesting to talk about how, if you have the Bitcoin, let's say, and how does it go in value, and when is a good time, let's say, when it like decreases in value or increases.
Okay, so I think it's roughly the same answer as last time we met, is that because it's a market, it have same forces that changes the price. So if there is more people who want to buy it, it'll go up in price. More people who want to sell, go down in price. Typically, in crypto specifically, it have to do with some sort of hype cycles. So let's say if there is a lot of coverage in mass media, like, oh, crypto is going up, so it start to go even higher because people have heard on TV it's going higher. In one of the books that I read a long time ago, it was written that the best marketing for an asset is the price. So it doesn't matter what it is. Let's talk about real estate, for example. If we keep on hearing in the news that price of homes going up, then that's what you're going to hear, and that's what's going to be a perception. Oh, it just keeps on going higher, keeps on going higher. Maybe you should buy because it just keeps on going higher. It becomes like this Ponzi scheme. So that's one aspect. Yeah, whenever there is appetite for people to participate in trading, and there is disbalance between buyers and sellers, that's when price is changing. So usually like think about your life, my life as a regular people. When do we have desire to spend money on crypto or anything, any investment? It's when we have some savings, we don't really need them right away, and we have a hope that it's gonna increase in value. And that's kind of the gist of it, right?
Right.
Now, if we add more sophisticated participants like funds and financial institutions, well, they also have impact of financial cycles, availability of cheap capital, and that's why funds rate from Federal Reserve play a big role here, because if they have cheap access to funds, then they might gamble on crypto. And if they don't, they decide not to and go something more sure, like treasuries, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the gist how it trades and why. And the market, another thing we didn't talk about, nodes are dispersed around the globe, and the activity of these cryptos also dispersed around the globe, because we're here talking about crypto in States, and some people doing transactions in China and in Hong Kong and Singapore and in Africa and everywhere. So whenever it's big, important thing not to focus on country specific news or developments, and not to forget about that it's global. So a lot of times we do forget that, but things that impact our day-to-day life here might be same or worse or better in other countries. So for example, accessibility of crypto, ATMs for Bitcoin, or how easy or hard it is to open exchange accounts and things like that is vastly different. So that's one thing to remember as well. So we might have price going up, and we would think like, wow, times are tough in States, why the price is going up? Well, it's because maybe somewhere in Asia there is a injection of capital and people feel like they have savings and they want to park the money in crypto, for example. and gamble a little bit. That's kind of goes back to what we talked last time around. Like, don't try to explain market why it should go up or down. It's going where it wants to go, given the summary of the entire globe, right? The participants of different kinds, locations, and motives. What else?
Also, very useful information.
How about exchange, right? Because you can do exchange from fiat to BTC. You also could do BTC to ETH, for example. So exchanges is where we can trade, can exchange from one to another, and there are listed pairs. So pair is a way for you to go from one, it's a market basically to go from one asset to another. And these pairs are different from exchange to exchange. Some have a lot of pairs, some have not a lot of pairs. But what's interesting is that since the asset is identical, you can buy it in one exchange and sell it on the other exchange. In a way, it's a way to, I guess, cover your trades, you know? So now, as far as taxation goes, we are taxed on exchanges from crypto to crypto and from crypto to fiat. We not get taxed, obviously, when we buy something using fiat. So you need a full transaction. So it starts from fiat, you exchange to some sort of crypto. It needs to go next step in order for it to become taxable transaction. Income from mining and from staking is also taxable transaction, and it's taxed as ordinary income. You can treat it as it's your job. You're getting paycheck from work. Same goes here. So however much you make from mining or staking, that is considered regular ordinary income, and it's taxable. Transactions based on holding period, transactions can be taxed higher or smaller percent rate, right? Generally speaking, if you hold it, and it's true for not only crypto, it's also for stocks and so forth. If you hold something for more than a year, it's called long-term capital gain. I mean, no loss. Let's just imagine you in profit. Capital gain that you've been holding, the position you've been holding for a year or longer, that result in a profit. If you hold it for a year longer, then it's a smaller percent for taxation, smaller rate for taxation. If you sold before 1 year, then it's called short-term capital gain, and it's taxed as a ordinary income rate. So that's something also to consider. So it's from taxation perspective, it's better to hold a year or longer. But at the same time, you shouldn't really think about taxation as a primary reason how to trade, because, I mean, you're talking about, I don't know, 25% versus 15% tax rate. So you're talking about 10% difference. But usually your trading provides you far more volatility. Could be plus 20%, could be 20 times of what you put in, right? So taxation, I would say, should not be your primary reason to buy or sell.
I see.
What else? So we talked about wallets, right? You seems like already found Exodus.
Yeah.
So here's let's talk about scams a little bit. So scams became really popular in crypto space because crypto became pretty popular. And how it typically happens, hackers would create fake exchanges or fake wallets. And when you create account or you create wallets, so this way you provide them with your login and password that you otherwise would use, and that's all they need. After that, they can basically log in under your credentials and get your money. So with wallets, for example, typical case would be, let's say you want to install Coinbase wallet. How it can happen, you would go to App Store and you would search for Coinbase, and you have multiple options come up. And some of those might be malicious programs. They would look like Coinbase wallet, but they were not. So they're not made by Coinbase as a company. They were made by some hacker that made it look like it's genuine. And then you would log in and then game over. So big deal is to verify that exchange that you type in address in the website or the app that you download from the App Store are indeed real thing. So how you can do that for apps, you can probably be reasonably sure it's correct if you see there are many downloads, many reviews, like thousands, right?
Right.
And it's usually on top of the search results. But if it's something less popular, not Coinbase, some smaller exchange or smaller wallet, it would be probably pretty hard to find out if it's genuine or not. Therefore, probably stick with those that are known, publicly known and popular. Because that's pretty common scam. Either exchange address that looks similar yet different, or the wallet that is looking similar but is incorrect. Okay. What else? You can have multiple instances of the same wallet on different devices. So for example, you have Exodus on iPad, you have Exodus on iPhone, you have Exodus on a MacBook. They all can be pointing to the same address in the cloud. So there is no really restriction how many wallets can point to account in the cloud. Make sense? In a way, it's a way for you to create resiliency. Like if you drop your phone in the toilet, now you have iPad. If that is on fire, then you have computer. And if all of those happen to disappear, you might have seed phrase in your head that you can use to recover your wallet access on new device. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the gist of it. Now, let's talk about maybe more philosophically about future of crypto, or where is it at compared to where it started. So right. I think Bitcoin was invented like 13 or 14 years ago, and it's still here. So that's good news.
Yeah.
The popularity seems to be growing rather than shrinking. The amount of attention that it gets from mass media and government agencies is only growing. So all of those are reasons to believe it's gonna stay forever. I mean, I won't say forever. It will stay for reasonable amount of time, maybe our lifetime. There is more and more people and entities that start to believe that this is the future, that the blockchain is a layer that would host the future of finance one way or another. And we also haven't talked about smart contracts. So smart contracts are interesting way to code some sort of execution on top of blockchain. So not only you have account system where we know how much money you have, how much money I have, we also can put small bits of code on a blockchain, and they would live there indefinitely until some sort of trigger happens. And usually triggers could be time-based. Let's say in 5 days, send money from Dmitry to Max. That could be one smart contract. The other one could be if price of oil crosses $100 per barrel, again, send money to Max. So some sort of if condition. And yeah, so what introduced Ethereum compared to Bitcoin is not only we can send money around, we also can execute code given some sort of change of environment. Not even change of environment, given some sort of condition. So then you might have heard something like DeFi, right? Decentralized finance. So what happened with DeFi, people figured out, okay, so we can create quite sophisticated models. We can create pools of liquidity where there will be accounts that people would deposit funds, and we would be able to move them around in a way that is advantageous for some people. Let's say they want to take loan, like remember example was a bank, right? Instead of going to bank, you can just participate with DeFi protocol, asking for some sort of funds. In return, you're going to provide them interest. So now we basically automated the entire bank as a model. That business model that used to be supported by a brick and mortar store, an office, 20 people in the branch, computers, desks, and everything, security guard. Now it's just a code on the blockchain. So things like that allows you to think that there is a future for crypto or blockchain in general, because they unlock so more efficient, optimized way of performing business compared to traditional finance. And these are just very specific, very obvious use cases. Think about, you probably heard of NFTs, right? Non-fungible tokens. What does it mean? Non-fungible means it's hard or impossible to duplicate. So everything, everywhere that we have uniqueness, that can be a use case for use of non-fungible tokens. So for example, deed for property, for example, your driving license, for example, like your medical record, anything that is have to be unique and stored and distributed can be a use case for non-fungible tokens. And on top of that, we're probably going to have business models that don't even exist right now. So we know we have ticketing, right, for like shows, movies, Formula One races. So of those are examples on good use cases for non-fungible tokens. And now we have a marketplaces as well, where these tokens are traded similar as exchanges. On exchanges, we trade BTC against ETH. On these marketplaces, you can buy and sell NFTs and trade them. And even more so, you can acquire royalties. For example, the new, how you say, not a new model, but one of the use cases we have for NFTs is, for example, for music artists or those people who create digital art. They would create their work, their content, and they would sell ownership or participation in ownership through auction of these non-fungible tokens. So for example, you create a song and you say, okay, well, to finance this song, maybe even future song, I'm going to sell 100 units of NFT, you call it, I don't know, max, right? And you say the auction is for 100 of these units, and proceeds that I'm going to get from these sales, I'm going to use to finance production of this music with maybe some margin for your personal gain. And what do people gain in return? They would gain, I don't know, perhaps you're going to codify in NFT that all the future sales of this music piece going to be distributed among owners of these NFTs. So you put in work once and you got your money to finance and get your profit as a producer. They will get ongoing, indefinite revenue from your sales. Let's say you something important like an album by Beatles, right? For 50 years in the future, they will get royalties from each individual sale of the song. distributed among 100 NFT owners. So that's an example of what people do right now in creative space. Okay, what else? Anything you can think of?
I'm trying to process everything.
Okay, as you process it, I'm thinking what else we didn't cover. Okay, there is another thing that we haven't talked about called oracles. So remember smart contracts, they trigger on specific events, either time or price or some sort of news. They trigger execution of some sort of code. So the way for them to get information a lot of times is provided by service provider called oracles. Oracles are also, or distributed oracles. So these are also blockchains that the sole job is to provide these type of smart contracts with information. So they keep on tracking price, news, and other events and feeding them. So basically, they have integration between blockchain that have smart contracts on it and Oracle blockchain, right? They kind of talk to one another. And once the smart contracts recognizes that there is an event that is a trigger for the smart contract execution, then it executes. And will have to be some sort of fee negotiated between these two because oracles also don't work for free. So they need to get some sort of fee paid. Yeah, so that's another category of offering in the crypto space. There are oracles, distributed oracles. Again, you can kill one node, but you cannot kill the whole oracle chain. They, in fact, I'm not sure even they need a chain. They might just have a network, and that's how they function. So I'm not really sure details on that, but they typically have some sort of token that uses blockchain just because they pay to one another or they charge fees and get paid in that token and so forth. So there is typically on all chains, there is always a native token for that chain just to operate it, the whole thing. There were a lot of project businesses that the sole purpose of the project was to create tokens and sell them, and that's it. Like there was a lot of it's called a ICO, initial coin offering, back in 2017, where any given Joe could copy code of like Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. They would create their own chain with minor modifications, call the token for the chain, whatever, max. And they would say, hey, this is up and coming blockchain. We solved this and this problem. It's going to be the future. And they would sell those tokens for millions of dollars.
Oh, wow.
And you would never heard about them again. They would just disappear. So it was thousands of these things in 2017. And a lot of them we never hear again. They just gone. They ghost chains at this point. So that was the problem in 2017. So every bull market have some sort of hype around it. So in 2017, there was ICOs. In let's say 2021, 2022, the hype was around DeFi protocols. And there was another term called yield farming, which idea was like this. If you have multiple or number of DeFi protocols out there, they all try to provide you with some sort of interest for the funds that you deposit on those platforms. So what would do yield farming algorithms? They would basically constantly monitor those pools of liquidity and see where it will be mismatch between earnings, and they would swap back and forth funds between these platforms to cumulatively earn you the most yield possible. It's almost like it can be compared to how you say currency trading, maybe, where okay, yen is strong, then yen falls, then franc is strong, then franc falls. So it will constantly monitor which asset is outperforming on which platform and would move funds around to be always on the most effective use of your funds. So those were yield harvesting protocols. That was the theme of like 2021, 2022. Yeah, so that's, I guess, in a nutshell that. Now let's talk about, I guess, security and safety of your funds. We agree that you basically can move around in the world. The only thing that you need to access your funds is internet and a wallet. So, which gives you benefits, right? Unlike physical assets like gold or currency like dollars, it's never really visibly. You can't really tell if someone have it or they don't, right? So this way you can cross borders and be more or less invisible to the naked eye, right? Also, one other benefit is speed of cross-border payments. Before we used to use something like bank transfers or how you call it, Western Union, and it might take a couple hours, couple days, and in order for you to send funds, you need to tell what's the name and maybe passport numbers of the recipient. They need to come specific office location, and then they need to provide this documentation. So with crypto, the only thing you need to send money is to know the address of the recipient, and that's it.
Yeah.
And funds are moving pretty fast. It's anywhere between couple seconds and, I don't know, maybe half an hour at most. It's all dependent on how the algorithm is structured and the amount of transaction is in a queue for registration. So if the network is backed up with many transactions, it might take a bit longer, but typically it doesn't take more than half an hour. So yeah. So then, for example, it's interesting to study how real life events shape the use of crypto in like distressed areas like Venezuela, Argentina, Ukraine, Russia, Africa, right? You can actually see how people use these things in real life. And this is real life experiment. Instead of just thinking or hypothesizing about how it might work out, you actually can see how they use it, when they use it, what works, what doesn't work. And there are even countries that already made Bitcoin as a legal tender. So as El Salvador, a small country in a tropical area, did that. In Switzerland, I think it's not the whole country, but specific cities made it legal tender. In certain states in America, you can pay taxes with crypto. As far as taxation, certain countries are more welcoming for crypto than others. So yeah, it's a fragmented world, but it's progressing.
Wow.
And then, okay, another thing we haven't talked about is CBDC. What is it? Central Bank Digital Currency, CBDC. So what is that? So unlike what we just talked about, the only thing is in common is that they use ledger technology. Everything else, they're completely different. The purpose of CBDC is to provide speed of settlement, but don't allow it to be hosted by public, but hosted as by central banks, basically by government. And you may or may not have couple additional features. So in China, they full throttle testing CBDC. They already had it, I would say, 2 years ago. And they already been testing it in big experiments where thousands and millions of people have been involved. And they do not have privacy in it. For American people, privacy is a big deal. And whenever this topic comes up in the media, hey, we should maybe think about digital dollar or CBDC, whatever the term they use, immediately public comes up and certain Congress members come up and say, hey, we want to make sure there is privacy embedded in this protocol. We don't want American people to be policed and spied on, right?
Right.
But it seems like it's not the case in China, where they did not program privacy. So all the transactions are visible, how you spend your money, how much you have, it's all visible. There's so far not enough understanding, at least for me, what's going to be the future between private and CBDCs, and how they're going to coexist, or how they're going to fight one another. Obviously, we probably feel like it would be better if we own our money and funds ourselves, but at the same time, why there is use case for banks? Because let's say if you are elderly and you don't really good with technology, you might not even have a cell phone, right?
Mhm.
With banks, they serve you they help you with the, how you say, simplicity, I guess, in a way. I mean, simplicity and bureaucracy at the same time, right? You can always come to a bank and say, hey, give me hard cash, right? And they give you just paper money. So maybe for someone who old is good. You also don't need to have a cell phone to have money given to you. And some people still like using checks. But also there is a negative. You call them, it's their answering machine. They might not be qualified to answer your questions and so forth. And sometimes they ask questions like, why do you send money? Who do you send money? Why you send money so often, right? They ask these questions. There is a thing called a suspicious activity report, SAR. And that thing kicks off after 10 grand in transaction. And it doesn't even have to be one transaction, can be consequent transaction that cumulatively 10 grand or more. So that kicks off suspicious activity report, and then banks are obligated to ask you these questions. So with crypto, a lot of these overheads, a lot of these challenges are gone. You don't have to ask permissions anybody, and it works. So, and especially now, today we're talking about when it's March 19, and last week we've seen a lot of banks, well, not a lot, but so far it's 3 banks, I think. If we count Credit Suisse, it's 4 banks that are in trouble.
Wow.
And government comes and helps them with funds and additional support, while crypto is intact. Basically, it's still functioning. It still doesn't require anybody's overhaul. It's in fact, it's going higher with all this bad news. So we can ask question, who is buying, right? So maybe those people who get discouraged by recent events.
Yeah.
So yeah, now the most I know about CBDC in America, it is United States, it is done by Fed Research Lab somewhere, I think, in Massachusetts area. And I think they're partnering with MIT. And I think it's called Project Hamlet. So that's the most I think I know about this topic. So they've been exploring CBDC for probably already close to 5 years. And thus far, there is not a whole lot of public information what they came up with. And in Europe, they also testing cross-border payments between different entities, different countries. Also more like a testing at this point. As far as companies and governments using public blockchains, I know Ripple is involved in some sort of collaboration with countries and central banks.
Mm-hmm.
And companies are using Ethereum for some sort of bond sales and other projects as well. I think even today I read that I think Australian bank send money between some sort of entities using their own token that they issued on a Ethereum network. So
Oh, wow.
there is some sort of adoption going on. It's not clear which way it's gonna go. There is definitely a battle that's gonna be already happening between old financial system and these technologies, and we have politics in the mix. We have regulators and so forth. So it is pretty hard to predict what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. Yeah, but a lot of people are losing faith in dollar and in traditional financial system. So, and once you use crypto in some way or fashion, after a couple of tries, you start to click in your head like, oh, this is easy, or this is fast, or this was painless, you know? So
Yeah.
Once you try it, you start to yourself see use case even for yourself in your personal life. And on top of that, I think there would be a lot of business models that are not even explored right now that would live on top of these smart contracts layers, blockchains. And then there are topics of scalability and speed and resiliency. There is a topic called blockchain trifecta, which suggests that between scalability, security, and speed, I think I forgot, maybe I'm wrong, but you only can solve two of these. You can't solve all three. So some chains are geared towards speed, but they're not as scalable. Some are more towards security, but they're not as fast, and so forth. So I think there is so far no ideal chain. It's just we have chains for specific cases that fit more than others. So some are better fit for smart contracts, some are better fit for NFTs, some are better fit for just straight up money as far as speed, transaction speed. So yeah, it's I don't think it's wild west anymore like it was, I don't know, 5 years ago, but it's definitely interesting to follow and something interesting to learn from. It's kind of exciting. It's kind of reminds, I mean, I'm not that old, but I think it's probably very similar to what the internet looked like in late 90s. So you had this initial companies that came up with protocols and start testing different business aspects of using these. And the first websites would start to pop up and they look like shit back in the day. And then boom, you have Facebook, and then you have MySpace, and then you have Napster, right? So I think right now in a time where we're just about to see Facebook, Napster type of thing showing up on the horizon. Maybe not this year, but sometime in the near future. So far, we just had like a test drive, what can be done. Now I think especially if we're going to see regulation that would help with adoption, then we might see some real interesting use cases and mass adoption. So, and I think another thing we can talk about today is network effects. The idea behind network effects is that if you have a platform that keeps acquiring users, at some point, users start to participate in this platform because there is a lot of users there already. So you benefiting from the amount that is high and it's keep on growing. So you want to participate in it because it's already high. So a good example would be any kind of social medias. If everybody already on Facebook, then you have to be on Facebook because this is how people communicate.
Correct. Yeah.
So with network effect, with regards to cryptocurrencies, same thing. Those networks that have more use and utility become more valuable by definition, right? Therefore, their tokens become more valuable. So let's say if in order for your business to work, you need ETH to transact. That means, and there are more companies like yours, that means there is already demand for ETH, even though we're not specifically not specifically using ETH in our business transaction, but we needed to send transactions for whatever we do. So it creates the demand. And so for the more of companies like yours and mine are on that blockchain, then there is more and more demand for ETH, and ETH price goes up. So that's another aspect of what increases the price. So the more utility specific blockchain have, the more there is demand for specific token of that blockchain.
Yeah.
Questions?
No, so it's pretty clear.
Dude, cannot be that clear.
I mean, it makes sense. So it's
okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you have more questions or something to talk about, we can catch up later.
Okay, sounds good.
It's like that's the way that it is. It's like that's the way that it is. It's that next door neighbor, the wake up the